Talk Radio 600 WBOB welcomes you to Life Radio, where we ask the experts about everything concerning your home, your health, and your happiness. Life Radio is brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303 for the Orange Park Cancer Center. Now, here's your host, John Vitas.
Good morning and welcome to the Life Radio Show. We appreciate you joining us here today. It looks like it's going to be more of a somber subject today, unfortunately. We like to try to bring some happiness and joy to you, but under the circumstances, it's probably not going to be one of those shows, but I would be remiss if I didn't remember the shooting victims of Newtown, Connecticut. It's just a terrible incident, and I know it's been plastered all over the news. And today I brought in one of my guests and a sponsor of the show, might I add. Her name is Tracy Riley, and among her many talents, she is a grief specialist. And, you know, usually when we lose a loved one or something, it's kind of related more directly to the family and some friends. And the circle maybe it's not quite as big as it is in this case, because this circle has pretty much engulfed the world in grief in one way, shape, or form. This is basically, in my opinion, saddened the majority of our planet. So it really goes outside the lines, if you will. And while Tracy usually helps us with, the more immediate side of family members, so forth, we're going to have to get her to expand her horizons today, because this is grief on a bigger nature. And, last year, I think it was, Tracy was with me, and we titled our show Seasons Grievings, and it was basically how we feel and how we deal with the loss of loved ones, especially during the holidays, because it can be that much harder. So we will talk a little bit about that today, but the main focus of today's show is, of course, the tragedy in Connecticut. Tracy, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thanks for stopping in with us today.
Thanks, John. I always love being here with you.
Tracy, I think what I'd like to start off with is I want to read the names of these victims off to our listeners. Charlotte Bacon, she was, and these first 20 that I'm going to name are the children, and none of them were born before 2005. So, obviously 7 years old and even younger in certain cases. It's just a tragedy. But Charlotte Bacon, one of the victims, Daniel Barden, Olivia Engel, Josephine Gay, Anna Marquez Green, Dylan Hockley, Madeline Sue, Catherine Hubbard, Chase Kowalski, Jesse Lewis, James Mattioli, Grace McDonald, Emily Parker, Jack Pinto, Noah Posner, Carolyn Praviti, Jessica Ricos, Avielle Richmond, Benjamin Wheeler, and Allison Wyatt. Among the adults that were also, their lives were taken, is Rachel Davino, Dawn Hochsprung, Anne Marie Murphy, Lauren Rousseau, Mary Sherlock, and Victoria Soto. Folks, these probably just, to some people, those are just names that I'm reading, but these are lives, and these 26 people, this circle is absolutely huge of the people that are grieving. When you talk just about, we talk about the immediate family members, obviously that's the inner circle of grief, if you will, but it expands, like we said earlier in the show, much further than that. And you're going to hear things on the news about gun control, and there's going to be questions why and what could have been done and so forth. And we might, dabble in those a little bit. But what I really wanted to concentrate on today with Tracy is what do we do now, Tracy? Let's maybe start with the family members and the grieving process. What is happening with those folks mentally at this stage?
I think given the severity of this situation and the senseless loss that they have experienced, I would venture to say that the majority of these family members are in shock, like the rest of us in the nation. We are absolutely in shock. A lot of times when we see these school shootings, they're teenage boys and their classmates had upset them or bullied them or made fun of them in some way. And from what I can understand, this young man had nothing to do with the school. He was not necessarily affiliated with the school in any way. He just randomly chose it and went in and did this horrific crime. And so I think everyone up there is probably in a sense of shock and trying to make sense of it and understand the why, which is not something we're probably going to understand, unfortunately, in this situation.
Well, Tracy, some of the things that you deal with on the grief side, and particularly, are more individually, when we talk more about just the individual families and so forth. And And when you come across something like this, what is something that we could to say to these masses of people who are obviously grieving over this, something that goes way outside the family members?
I think a lot of times people want to place blame when something like this happens. They want to say, oh, it's the groups that regulate gun control, or it was God, or it was a lack of security in the school system. I think placing blame is one of those things that we absolutely need to stay away from. But some of the things that I would think it would be okay to say to someone is, I don't know why this happened. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay what has happened. There's been a lot of school shootings, but none of them are ever the same. And so I wouldn't expect that you would say, oh, well, I know how you feel because I've lost my child too. Those are some things you wouldn't want to say. But I certainly think that staying away from blaming certain groups or certain individuals is the best thing. We don't need to place blame. We're all grieving together in this situation.
Well, I think something that you were talking about as well that I think deserves maybe a revisit is it's one thing when you have lost a loved one and you kind of saw it coming, if you know what I'm saying. It's
right.
Whether it be a disease or something or old age or whatever, you kind of have a little bit of preparation time. And so that's one side of the grief factor, but then there's the whole other side, the one we're talking about today, where it's not only instantaneous, it was done violently. So that obviously adds a whole new, that much harder to deal with this. Would you say that the grieving time is going to be much longer, as well as the questions about why and so forth, than, say, someone who has passed, maybe because of old age?
Right. Well, the natural order of things is that old people die first and younger people die last. And so the fact that we've completely reversed that order in this situation, again, is a shock.
Okay. Folks, we are talking to Tracy Riley today here on the Life Radio Show. She is a grief specialist, and we're trying to make a little bit of sense out of this whole issue up in Newtown, Connecticut. What a tragedy it's been, and hopefully we can maybe try to help with some of the answer some of the questions here for you. We'll sure as heck try for you today. It's a sad subject, but obviously it's reality, and it's one of the things that we have to deal with in life. And obviously this one's going to take a lot longer for this wound to close. And sometimes it's not. It's like Tracy said. It's not trying to understand. It's what happened. It's just trying to deal with now that it has happened. So we'll talk more with Tracy Riley when we come back. You're listening to Life Radio on Talk Radio 600. We'll be right back after these short messages.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio. Brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
And welcome back to the Life Radio Show. Thanks to you. We appreciate you listening with us this morning. Our subject matter today is the horrific incident that recently happened up in Newtown, Connecticut. And with me in the studio today is the lovely Miss Tracy Riley. She is a grief specialist, and she is also a supporter of the show. So, Tracy, I want to thank you for your support of the Life Radio Show. Without the nice folks like you, we couldn't make it go. And usually, like I said, we like to talk about things that are a little bit on the happier side, but reality is reality, and it must be faced. We cannot run away from it. So we're talking specifically about grief today, and there's several different areas of grief that we'd like to cover if we could today with us. And one, Tracy, is what makes each grief unique, because I'm sure they're all different in their own sort of way.
Right. Everyone that grieves so in a very unique way. It's unique to us as individuals. Just like if you think about, I know I've heard every snowflake is different. There's no two snowflakes that are the same. And I think grief a lot of times is the same way. It's going to start with the relationship with the person who died. Your relationship with that person was different than anyone else's relationship with that person. And of course, the stronger the attachment, the more difficult the grief journey will be. it only makes sense that if we were closest to that person, the more torn apart we're going to be after they're gone. Now, that's not necessarily to say that you had to get along with that person to grieve or to have a hard time after their death. There may be a feeling of maybe some unfinished business that you didn't get to attend to when someone died, especially if you had somewhat of a stressful or tenuous relationship with that person.
I was reading some of your writings, Tracy, and you wrote at one point, I was looking at my notes, and you said something to the effect of children like we adults are forever changed when a loved one has died unexpectedly. And this is something I think we need to talk about as well today, is there's the grief of the parent, but there's also the grief of the sibling, and that's obviously two different entities all in itself.
Right. What happens is if someone dies, you never are the same again. Your life doesn't ever go back to the way it was prior to that death. You look for a new normal. You look for a new way of adjusting, and you try to recreate a life and create a new identity. I've counseled with one young lady many times, and prior to the death of her sister, she had a sister, and now she identifies as an only child because she doesn't have her sister anymore. So death will always change things in one way or another, especially someone that you were particularly close to.
We were talking earlier about the, I guess, two types of death, if you will. One being the anticipated, i.e. old age and so forth, and or disease. And then there's the sudden death. Could you explain maybe a little bit in detail the differences between the two, even though it on the surface they seem pretty obvious?
Yeah, when you have a hospice situation or someone that's terminally ill and you can kind of anticipate or know that their death is coming, people will do what we call anticipatory grieving or some memory making in advance, and they can go ahead and say their goodbyes and settle up old finished business and really have the opportunity to make amends with that person, if you will. When there's a sudden death, when there's a heart attack or a car accident or a homicide situation, there is no time to do that. And so it changes a lot of times the way we grieve because it doesn't allow us to say goodbye. It doesn't allow us to prepare for the future. It doesn't allow us to do anything that maybe we had planned to do as it relates to that person, that individual, and that relationship.
Tracy, where you've got now, I guess within the last couple of days in particular, and that's the whole funeral experience. How do you see that being as actually going to the funeral? Is that another chapter, if you will, on dealing with grieving? Is that's not necessarily the final goodbye, but I guess it's just another unfortunate dose of reality to kind of let you know that this is, in fact, happening? Right.
People ask me all the time if children should go to funerals, and my response is that if a child is old enough to love, then a child is old enough to grieve. And one of the ways that we grieve and mourn someone when they're gone is to have a meaningful ritual for those that are left behind. This will aid in social and emotional and even spiritual healing after a death. Funerals are a time and a place that we can really express our feelings about the death, how it has affected us, and our memories about that person. We can get together with those that are around us who are also grieving the loss. And there's no right or wrong way to do a funeral or a ritual. The most important thing is that we actually do have one, because our whole lives are about rituals, right. Births and marriages and engagement parties and the graduation things and everything we do, every stage of our life, there's a ritual that we engage in to honor it and express it. And a death is no different. You really have to engage in that ritual to experience it fully.
I want to talk to you a little bit about consoling. Too many times, you'll hear the same, I'm sorry about your loss, or if there's anything that, that we can possibly do, please feel free to give us a call. And there's the ones that are more, Spockish, as I like to say, and that's the ones that'll say, look, okay, they're gone. You need to get over it and just move on. And like you were saying earlier, we're not machines. So, and I think I really think Helen Keller put it well. She wrote, "Walking with a friend in the dark is better than walking alone in the light." Could you maybe put a little bit of emphasis on that? And maybe as friends of people who have had someone pass away, maybe give us some advice on how to talk with them and how to listen is probably just as important.
Right, absolutely. You know, in our society, we don't like pain. We take the stance that pain is bad and that if you're hurting, we have to fix it and we have to stop it. And so a lot of times we'll hear messages from people who mean well, but they just want to see the pain stop. And you'll hear comments like, you have to be strong for your mom, or you need to take care of your little brother, or now you're the man of the house. Grandpa wouldn't want you to cry. You know, I call these the buck up messages.
Right.
And basically it's the underlying message is that you don't have a right to hurt, so we have to avoid it. And what that does is that really denies the families the opportunity to feel that pain and to make that pain a part of this process. You know, grief is not just a one-time event. It is a process that continues throughout our lives, depending on the relationship with the person who died. We grieve over our lifetimes, and so it's not something that we're just going to wake up one day and go, oh, wow, you know, I don't miss my mom today, or I don't miss my little 6-year-old first grader anymore. That's not something that is ever going to happen. And so I think the best thing that we can do for people who are hurting is to say, you know, I can't change what happened, but I will sit with you while you hurt, and I will be here for whatever you need. If that's to listen, if that's to just be in your presence, if that's to hang the Christmas tree lights because your dad always did it and he's not here to do it anymore. I think it's important to ask people, you know, I know you're hurting. What can I do for you? When you say, call me if you need anything, everyone says that. I think those people that really want to help will say, I'm here. What can I do for you? I'm coming back tomorrow. Tell me what I can do for you.
Do you ever run into cases to where people just flat out aren't ready to talk, that they're just going to need some more time? How do you approach that? And I'm going to make this a two-part question. Men grieving, women grieving, obviously two different things. Could you maybe reiterate on that a little bit with us?
Yeah, let's start with that. A lot of times men are expected to be the strong ones. They're expected to kind of contain themselves and hold in those difficult feelings, where women are just known to be more emotional and they have a much easier time of expressing themselves. And so men, unfortunately, are really encouraged to just keep it to themselves and be strong and not let their grief out like women do.
Would it, in your opinion, it's probably helpful if a man has pretty much, I guess, another male to help with the consoling? That's probably a little bit easier than the other way around, and the same with women, or is it really just a matter of friendship?
It absolutely. It's a matter of who you're comfortable with. The very meaning of the word mourning means to let your grief go public and to share it with others. And so by its definition, we have to mourn with those around us. We need people that we feel safe and comfortable with, people that we can talk with, people that we can share our grief with. And that's what is actually done, the work of mourning.
I've been told that mourning and or grieving really is synonymous with our personalities. In other words, if you're a kind of a quiet person, then you're more apt to grieve quietly, and then there's folks like me who are more outspoken, and they have a tendency to be a little bit more outspoken about it. So I guess there is definitely a relationship between how you grieve and your personality in general?
Right. Everyone has a unique personality, and so that's often reflected in our grief as well. If we're quiet by nature, we're going to grieve maybe a little more quietly and withdrawn. If we're more outgoing, we might be more expressive in that grief reaction. Everyone's grief journey is unique to themselves.
And I think that's something that could come in helpful is when we know their personality like that. Obviously, if you've got a quiet person, you don't want to try to help them with their grievingness by being outspoken and so forth. You need to try to get down on that level and communicate in a nice, quiet, soft manner. Folks, we're talking to Tracy Riley. She's a grief specialist, and we're kind of kind of dwelling on a subject I don't really like to talk about, but unfortunately we have to talk about it, and that is the incident that happened in Newtown, Connecticut. We're going to talk more with Tracy Riley when we return. I'd like to also thank the good folks over at the Orange Park Cancer Center for sponsoring the show. We'll be right back with Life Radio in just a couple minutes. Stay with us.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio, brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
And welcome back to the Life Radio Show. Thank you for joining us here today. We are speaking with Tracy Riley. She's in the studio with us here today, and she's a grief specialist. And our subject matter, once again, is the horrific incident that recently happened up in Newtown, Connecticut, where we lost 20 children and 6 adults. It was everybody knows pretty much what happened, so I really don't want to dwell on that. I'd really like to try to concentrate on what we do next. How do we go through the grieving process? Is there a certain time limit on grieving, and does it vary depending on the person? And I would suspect that it does, especially when we were talking about the 2 types of deaths earlier, the ones that we kind of expect, and then the ones, obviously, that happened recently, which were obviously unexpected, and a more of the violent nature. Tracy, once again, I thank you for coming in with us today. I know you're a busy person, and I'm sure you've probably been getting your phone ringing quite a bit lately from different news organizations and so forth, and getting your perspective on this whole incident. So we do appreciate you spending some time with us today. We were talking a little bit about how men deal with grief, how women deal with grief, how we should communicate to people, and how we should probably veer away from the buck up syndrome, as you put it, and try to be a little bit more understanding, and don't, it sounds to me like you were saying, look, don't offer your services, just be there and start serving. You know, it's almost like, I don't want you to call me if you need anything. I'm here now, and let's do some of this stuff. You kind of brought up the Christmas lights in particular. And, you know, Tracy, if I could, I'd like to try to get in more of the, let's talk about the fact that it is, in fact, the holidays. I mean, there is no great time or no good time for this incident like this has happened to occur, but it's got to be that much worse closer to the holidays, as you and I are well aware of, as both of us being parents, is, you know, Tracy, these people have bought Christmas presents and put them under the tree. These people probably had plans to have grandma or uncles or aunts, whatever, come in and see the kids and so forth. These people have sent Christmas cards off with pictures of the family, and so everything I'm talking about just adds more and more and more to this grief. So here we are, Christmas morning. We've got those presents under the tree. What should we do, or what should have we done already with things like that? Let's kind of talk about the holiday side of this.
Right. You know, any time that you experience a traumatic loss such as this, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you right then. It's going to affect you on that person's birthday, on the anniversary of the death, but especially at the holidays. The holidays, if you think about what we do, a lot of businesses close down. We stay home or we visit with family. We slow down and we surround ourselves with the people that we love the most. And so, or in another case, some people that we kind of have to be stuck with for a few hours, whether we like them or not. They're our family.
Oh, that uncle we all have? Okay.
Yeah, that uncle that we all have that we're forced to share Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner with. So, but we slow down, we come together, and we spend time together. And so it's very evident at Christmas especially that someone is missing. And I think what a lot of people, even though they mean well, they'll say something like, well, just keep yourself busy. Or, you know, you're young, you could have other children. Or at least it didn't happen to, you know, the twin that was down the hallway. You know, we get a lot of those buck up messages of really that encourage us to deny the pain that we're feeling. And I think one of the most important things that we have to do when we're grieving is allow ourselves to feel that pain. And that doesn't come easily, and it's naturally not something that we want to do. But I think about it like a boomerang. If you throw a boomerang away, eventually it's going to come back to you. And our pain and our grief is the same way. If we keep pushing it down and pushing it down, eventually it's going to come back. It's going to bubble over, and it's going to demand that we take care of it. And so, because grief is a process and not a one-time event, we have to know that this pain will ebb and flow for months and probably years. And we just have to embrace that pain and not be afraid of it.
Well, here's one that I'm sure has come across your desk, if you will, or one of your clients has come up with this. Look, this is just so horrific, and let's just say that I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of one of these parents, and I come to see you, Tracy, and I'm just overwhelmed. I can't take it anymore. I don't think I can go on. What do you tell me?
I think a lot of times in these cases, the parents may feel like they may have those thoughts of, my child's not here anymore. I don't want to be here. Just thinking that I don't want to be here is very normal. It's when someone takes it to the next step of I don't want to be here, and here's how I'm going to make myself not here, and here's when and where and how I intend to do that. So the thoughts themselves are not necessarily abnormal or concerning. It's that plan and intent that goes with it. And that has to really be looked at by a clinician. And if the person is sitting in a clinician's office, then they've obviously taken that first step to say, I need some help and I can't go this alone. So there may be times that it has to get more involved with treatment, with an inpatient stay or some medication right away, something to keep that person safe.
Someone who is extremely, I guess that's the word I could use here, someone who is highly religious, and they have the loss of a loved one. Obviously, they can turn to the Lord, and that is helpful for them. What about the folks who are not necessarily atheists, but not really close followers of religion?
Right. I have the more the more time I spend with people, I have found that every traumatic situation, and especially a death, has some type of religious or spiritual background somewhere. We're always looking for the meaning to things, and that is one of the things that we do, especially when someone dies, is we naturally question the meaning and the purpose of life. We may question our philosophy of life or explore our religious and spiritual values. There's a lot of things that we really try to understand when a death like this happens. And I think for those people who do feel that they have a strong sense of faith, having that sense of faith does not keep us from mourning the loss. We don't grieve where people are. We grieve where they're not. And if someone has died, they're not with us. And that's why we're sad. Yeah, if our belief system is they're in heaven and they're in a better place, then that's fine. But that's not what we're sad about. We're sad that, my little Johnny is not with me right here today.
I want to ask you, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Tracy Riley. She is a grief specialist here in Jacksonville, and we are discussing, obviously, the pain and suffering that is going on with many of us, especially the family members and those immediate friends and family and so forth that around these deaths in Newtown, Connecticut. And Tracy, I wanted to go over a couple of things with you here that are, I guess what I would say is typical at the loss of a loved one, and one is loss of self. Could you tell me exactly what that means?
Right. Anytime we have we experience a loss, we feel like we probably lost a part of ourselves. Like if I felt like a part of me died when my mom died. We may also lose our identity. Like I shared with the young lady who lost her sister. Her identity went from having a sibling to being an only child. Another thing that we may lose a sense of ourself is our personalities. I just don't feel like myself anymore.
Right. And there's another one of the subjects here that I've come across as well is just the this sudden shock and just lack of feelings, because you're basically left numb in this case, which I think a lot of people still are.
Right, absolutely. We're all experiencing an emotional shock. These children, absolutely, the classmates and the neighbors and the school friends of these other children, they are probably in shock, yet they're so young, they really don't have the development to fully understand what death is, and that it's final, and that it's universal, and that it happens to everyone, and that it is irreversible. So the children are probably struggling with seeing everyone around them so sad, but not really understanding why and the severity of it because of their young age. And yet us adults are completely in shock and trying to figure out the why.
And there's a couple of other ones that I wanted to go over with you, some of the feelings that we get when it comes to the loss of a loved one. I've only got about 2 minutes before I have to go to break. And so I'm going to go ahead and give you these, and we'll just see what we can cover, then we'll pick up the rest of them when we come back for break. The subjects are fear, guilt, relief, sadness, and eventually reconciliation.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of times when a death occurs, we're afraid. In fact, C.S. Lewis even said, "I never knew grief was so much like fear." There's that underlying fear of who's going to take care of me? How will my life be the same? How will my life be different? So fear is something that adults and children alike experience.
We've got still another minute. Go ahead.
Okay, let me keep going. Let's talk about guilt. That is something that a lot of people feel like they deal with, especially some of these first responders out there in Connecticut. I've already heard them say they felt like they feel guilty because they weren't there in time, or they didn't stop it in some way. And so guilt is another very common emotion that we go through, and it's difficult to understand.
And I think another one of the things we might go through as well is we create these false scenarios. What if I'd only kept them out of school that day? What if I'd have only done this and I'd only done that? And that's something obviously that you need to put to rest as well, because you know it without sounding too harsh, it is what it is. I mean, sure, we could sit there and do the what ifs for forever and a day, but obviously it's we'll talk about the reconciliation part of it when we come back as well in dealing with this. And one of the things that I think you put plainly is you never get over grief. You just kind of learn to deal with it a little bit better. You're listening to Life Radio on Talk Radio 600. Be right back.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio. Brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
And welcome back to the Life Radio. Thank you for joining us here today as we're talking about one of the subjects that I don't really like to dwell on, unfortunately, and that is the sudden passing of our loved ones, and in more particular, the violent activities that happened up in Newtown, Connecticut. It's really a shame, and the whole world, I think, is still somewhat in shock. And you know, I've got to say, Tracy, even in my case, I could only watch the news and take this in doses, because I even felt myself being overwhelmed, and Lord only knows how these parents and the family members, uncles, aunts, and so forth, and the siblings feel. And obviously this happened in an environment that we feel like our children are safe, so there's always going to be the, you know, what is it that we can do to keep our children safer, and quite frankly, I'm not really sure what the answer is there. I know one thing that definitely is important, and that is staying in constant communication with your children. Keep an eye on your children. Take notes if there's anything about their day-to-day lives have changed a little bit. Watch out real closely for personality issues. Tracy, you got more to add to that?
You know, I do. Just yesterday I was interviewed by one of the local TV stations, and they wanted to know if there would have been any warning signs or something that we as a society could have picked up on that this shooter was going to do what he did. And what I explained to the news reporter was that there are no amount of mental health diagnoses or mental health illnesses that would have been able to get us from a mental health illness or a mental health diagnosis to what happened. So I'm not sure that we could have prevented it. I think I read somewhere that this man broke about 42 laws, all total, between the stealing of the gun and killing his mom and breaking into the school and killing those children and adults. So he broke about 42 laws. We have laws in place for a reason, but when people break them, we're not always right there immediately to do something about it. And given the fact that maybe he did have a mental health diagnosis, that's still a great big leap to mass murderer.
Tracy, you've got millions of patients or clients at one time that are grieving all over the same subject. How can you, on a broad basis, what can we say to those folks?
I think everyone needs to understand that we're all feeling this sense of loss. This has not just affected the people in Connecticut. This has affected everyone across our nation. This has affected school-age children. This has affected parents of school-age children. This has affected school personnel, because we're all looking at ourselves going, this could have been us. This could have been my school or my children's school, or I could have been the teacher that this happened to. And I think we actually gain a sense of camaraderie and a sense of oneness in this situation, because we all feel like it could have been us.
And something that you were speaking of, and I think I might can transition over to this by that, and that's the fact that you were talking really a little bit about the loss of security, and actually even more so the loss of meaning. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we send our children to school, and that's just one of those places where we think they're going to be safe, especially at an elementary school. It's not a middle school where hormones are raging. It's not a high school where there's lots and lots of drama going on, and there's things that have happened at other high schools and middle schools. This was an elementary school. We expected those children to have security, physical security, emotional security. We expected that. And through this act, we're all questioning, where are we safe? Where are the children safe? And where are we safe?
What are the best things at this point? And we're talking the parents trying to console their surviving siblings. And when your siblings, let's just say one of them is 4 and the other sibling is maybe 8, what kind of message do you give to them? Do you still basically just try to cover it up and maybe wait till they're a little bit older to explain in detail what happened? What's the best way here? What do you do?
No, we always talk to children based on their developmental level. They're not going to understand as much when they're younger, but as they get older and they understand more, their questions will change and their grief will change as they age. And so the best thing that we can do for these children is to let them be a part of the ritual, let them be a part of that funeral experience. I understand that there's a lot of candlelight vigils and other things that are happening in that area for remembrance and honoring these victims, and children need to be a part of that. They need to see everyone else grieving and know that their sadness is okay. It doesn't feel good and we don't like it, but it's okay, it's normal, and it's to be expected given this situation.
If given the choice, Tracy, would you reopen that school?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. I would go with probably not. And I think I have read that those children are going to be transitioned to a new school at some time after the first of the year. And I think given what has happened, that's probably in the best interest of everyone involved, because this was a huge trauma, and going back there is going to remind those children, and in a sense it could re-traumatize them. And so I think having a new school and in a new environment is probably the best thing for them.
I was kind of thinking that obviously there's financial ramifications here, and I was talking a little bit about this earlier today with a friend of mine, and I brought up the fact that maybe, not to get too far off course here, that maybe they could just take and just do a swap. In other words, take all the junior high school kids and put them over there so they can kind of deal with this a little bit better, and then put the other, put the grade school kids over the junior high side. But that's going to be tough. And it's, it's like you said, I guess this is a good way to reinforce what you're saying about the fact that grieving does not go away. This is why we have memorials.
Right. Absolutely.
And when as we get a little bit closer to the end of the show here, Tracy, I want to make sure I leave you time. You had a very touching poem. I want to leave you time to read today, and so I look forward to hearing that. I want to talk a little bit more. Let's get back on the holiday side. I guess we should remove the presents. Should we take all the pictures down? Should we leave them up? I mean, what exactly should we do here? And I guess it really kind of depends on each individual person. I would think that as much as it hurts, I would think that our loved ones wouldn't want us just to completely forget them. And so I think I would, as much as it would hurt, and maybe, I don't know if my wife would let us get by with that or not, but I feel like it is good to keep a memory around. And you've even said things to me before about how to go ahead and celebrate their birthday. If something was special to them, to go ahead and still honor that. And that's just yet another way of dealing with it.
Right, absolutely. I think those presents need to stay out. The pictures need to stay up. And it really doesn't matter. If you take a picture down, you still remember that person. You still know that they're gone. The picture can be a happier reminder of that person being there and what that person has meant to your life.
Tracy, this is obviously a horrific incident, and we've talked about this much more. So obviously the level of grieving is probably going to be higher, and in this case, longer. Do you have any speculation, and I know this is not going to be fact, but do you have any speculation as to when or if these people's lives can get back to somewhere close to normal?
I think it's going to take a lot of time. I think it's going to be a very long time before any of us lose the sense of fear that this has instilled in all of us.
Tracy, I'd like to, as we only got a couple minutes left in the show, could you, why don't you go ahead and read us that poem?
Yeah, this is called We Remember Them. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick of heart, we remember them. When we have joys and special celebrations we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are a part of us. We remember them.
That's a very nice poem, and a good way to, unfortunately, to have to close the show. Tracy, I wanted to ask if you'll go ahead and give us your phone number. If anybody has issues with grief, the loss of a loved one, or something of that nature, Tracy is local and very good at what she does. So, Tracy, if you would, give us your phone number in case anybody have issues, and a website.
904-704-2527. That website is www.newhopefl.com.
Okay, and Tracy, I want to thank you once again for being a part of the show today. I know this is not the liveliest of subjects, and as a matter of fact, my hat's off to you for the type of work you do. It takes a very special person to do what you do, and I can't think of anybody better for the job than Miss Tracy Riley. So once again, I appreciate you joining us here today on Life Radio. Folks, try to keep your chin up. Better days are ahead. I know it doesn't look that way now, but they're coming. You've been listening to Life Radio. We'll see you next Sunday.